My parents lied to keep me from attending college, so I built a career without them. And now they beg for handouts. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I genuinely believed my parents wanted what was best for me. We weren't rich, but my parents always spoke about education like it was a religion. My dad used to say, "Knowledge is the only inheritance that can't be stolen," and my mom would smile and pat my shoulder, promising, "We're saving for your college, sweetheart. One day you'll thank us for this." That promise became my motivation. I studied late into the night while my friends went out, fueled by the belief that all this hard work would lead somewhere. Every test I aced, every club I joined, every volunteer hour I logged, it all felt like bricks building the future they wanted for me. When other kids got grounded for bad grades, I got praised for my discipline. "You'll make it far," Dad would say. His voice full of pride I thought was genuine. Our house wasn't fancy, but it had warmth. The smell of my mom's coffee in the mornings. The sound of my dad's typewriter from his home office. Everything felt stable, safe, and honest. I didn't question anything. Why would I? My family was the kind of people who gave advice to others about responsibility and financial planning. I even remember overhearing my mom bragging to a neighbor once, "We've been saving since he was 12. That boy's going to have every opportunity." I smiled from the stairs, proud that I was worth that kind of sacrifice. So, when the acceptance letter from my dream university arrived, I felt like everything was falling into place. I remember holding the envelope with trembling hands, reading my name over and over like it wasn't real. I could already picture the campus, the dorms, the lectures that would shape my career in computer science. My chest felt like it might burst with pride. That night, I rushed home, heart pounding, letter in hand, ready to tell my parents the news that would change everything. I had no idea that what I thought was the happiest moment of my life would become the start of the biggest betrayal I'd ever face. I remember walking through the front door, waving that acceptance letter like a trophy. "I got in!" I shouted, grinning so wide my cheeks hurt. My mom looked up from her phone, startled, and my dad peeked over his glasses from the living room. For a second, I expected them to jump up, hug me, celebrate, but instead there was this pause, a strange, heavy silence that didn't make sense. My dad finally said, "That's great, son. Congratulations." His voice sounded rehearsed, not excited. My mom smiled weakly, then looked down again. I laughed awkwardly, waiting for more, maybe a "we're proud of you" or "this calls for dinner out." But it never came. Instead, my mom sighed and said, "We'll have to talk about finances soon. College isn't cheap, you know." That hit me weird. "But you've been saving for years, right?" I asked, half smiling, expecting reassurance. My dad cleared his throat. "Things have been tough lately. We'll figure it out. But maybe you should consider taking a gap year first. You can work, save up, and—" "A gap year?" I interrupted, confused. "Dad, this is my dream school." "You told me there was a fund." Mom quickly cut in. "Don't raise your voice. We'll discuss this later." The room felt colder after that. The acceptance letter, which had felt like gold in my hands hours ago, now felt like a piece of paper mocking me. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the ceiling, replaying their reactions in my head. My dad's new car in the driveway suddenly stood out like a red flag. My mom's constant online orders. The "things have been tough" excuse didn't add up. I tried to push away the unease, telling myself I was overthinking. But deep down, something didn't feel right. My parents had always preached honesty and hard work, so why did their eyes look guilty when I mentioned the college fund? That was the first night I couldn't sleep, and for the first time in my life, I started to wonder, what else had they been hiding from me? A week later, I found the truth by accident. My mom had asked me to grab an old warranty receipt from the home office while she cooked dinner. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, and there it was, an envelope labeled "College Fund." My heart actually skipped. It was real. They hadn't lied, or at least that's what I thought. Inside were a few old bank statements, yellowed at the edges. I flipped through them quickly, excitement turning to confusion, then nausea. The balance had been drained months ago. The last few transactions were payments to a cruise line, furniture stores, and a luxury outlet. Tens of thousands of dollars gone. I stared at the page, trying to make sense of it. My mind kept repeating, There has to be a mistake. Maybe they moved the money somewhere else. I walked into the kitchen, papers in hand, my voice trembling. "Mom, what is this?" She turned, eyes wide, spatula still in her hand. "Where did you get that?" "You told me this was for college," I said, waving the papers. "Why does it show shopping and a vacation?" Her face twisted, not with guilt, but anger. "You went through our things?" "That's none of your business." Dad walked in, rubbing his forehead. "What's going on?" "He's accusing us of stealing from him," she snapped. I held up the papers. "I'm not accusing anyone. I just want to know what happened to my future." Dad's tone dropped low and sharp. "Watch your mouth. You think you're entitled to that money? We've supported you your whole life. That money went where it was needed." "Needed?" I said, almost laughing. "You mean your vacation to Hawaii?" The air in the room turned electric. My mom slammed the spatula down. "Don't you dare talk to us like that. You have no idea what we sacrificed for you." That was the moment it hit me. They didn't feel guilty. They felt justified. They had taken my future and turned it into their comfort, and in their eyes, I was the selfish one for questioning it. I didn't even realize I was shaking until my dad said coldly, "Grow up. The world doesn't owe you anything." I stared at them, the people I thought were my biggest supporters, and realized something that made my stomach drop. My parents weren't just liars. They were thieves, and they'd stolen the one thing I'd spent my entire life working for. After that confrontation, everything in the house shifted. The warmth that once filled our home turned to ice. Meals were silent. My parents barely looked at me, except for occasional glares that said, "You've crossed a line." I tried to reason with them again the next morning, hoping maybe we could talk like adults. "We can fix this," I said quietly. "Maybe we can talk to the bank or work something out. I can still apply for loans." My dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. "You're not getting any loans under our name. We're done throwing money into that bottomless pit you call a future, a bottomless pit." That's what he called my education. My mom chimed in without glancing from her coffee mug. "You should stop blaming us and start working. Maybe a year in the real world will teach you some gratitude," I wanted to scream, but the words got stuck in my throat. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the betrayal, the coldness, the way they twisted it like I was the one who'd done something wrong. That night I packed a duffel bag. My dad noticed and said flatly, "If you're leaving, don't expect us to bail you out when you come crawling back." I left anyway. No dramatic exit, no shouting match, just quiet heartbreak as I stepped into the cold night, carrying the weight of 18 years of lies on my back. For the first few weeks, I crashed on a friend's couch, eating instant noodles and lying awake wondering how it all went so wrong. Every time I saw pictures of college orientations online, it felt like a knife twist. My parents didn't call once, not even to check if I was okay. But even in the silence, I could hear my dad's voice in my head. Grow up. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time I did, but not in the way he meant. Not as the obedient son they could manipulate, but as someone who'd prove that I could rise without them. Still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. Because at that point, I had no plan, no money, and no family to fall back on. Just a bruised heart and a promise to myself. I would never let them break me again. The first few months on my own were brutal. I bounced between part-time jobs, flipping burgers during the day, unloading delivery trucks at night, and doing odd shifts at a gas station when I could. Every dollar went toward rent for a tiny basement room that smelled like mildew and loneliness. Some nights I'd just stare at the cracked ceiling, wondering if my parents were sitting comfortably on their couch, pretending they hadn't destroyed my life. I tried applying for financial aid, but without parental signatures or credit history, I hit wall after wall. Every rejection email stung like salt in an open wound. Still, I refused to call home. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing I was struggling. Instead, I worked myself to exhaustion, trying to save every penny for something, anything that resembled a future. My phone would buzz every now and then with texts from my mom. At first, they were guilt-laced. "We did what we had to do. You'll understand one day." Then they turned passive-aggressive. "Stop acting like a victim. You're an adult now." Finally, they became outright cruel. "Maybe college wasn't meant for you." Not everyone's cut out for that life. Each message hit like a punch, but I stopped replying. Instead, I found comfort in my silence. It was the only thing I could control. One night, after a particularly grueling double shift, I walked past a cafe and saw a guy typing away on his laptop. The screen flashed lines of code, and it stopped me in my tracks. I used to dream of that, of creating something from nothing, of writing code that changed lives. I stood there for a long time, watching through the glass, feeling that old spark flicker again. That night, I made a decision. I pulled out my cracked phone, searched free coding courses, and started learning right there on my mattress floor. The glow from the screen lit my room like a promise. I didn't have a college fund, a degree, or parents cheering me on, but I had determination. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the betrayal. Hope. Little did I know, that tiny spark would become the fire that rebuilt my entire life. That decision changed everything. My nights stopped being about survival and started being about transformation. I'd work 12-hour shifts, come home drenched in sweat and oil, and then sit on the floor with my old laptop until sunrise, watching tutorials and debugging messy code. I had no formal guidance, no professor to lean on, just sheer stubbornness and the belief that I could still make something of myself. Most people around me thought I was crazy. My roommate at the time, a guy named Aaron, used to shake his head every night. "Dude, you barely sleep. You're killing yourself for what, YouTube videos?" He'd say. I'd just smile and reply, "Yeah, but someday this will pay off." And slowly, it did. I started taking small freelance gigs online, fixing website bugs, editing HTML templates, building basic landing pages. The pay was awful at first, $20 here, $40 there. But every completed job felt like a brick laid on the foundation of the life I was rebuilding. I still remember the night I got my first $500 project. I stared at the payment notification for minutes, my hands trembling. It wasn't just money, it was proof that I was finally worth something on my own terms. I began connecting with other developers on forums, trading advice and encouragement. One older programmer, who went by Theo, became a sort of mentor to me. He said, "You don't need a degree to prove your worth. You need results. Keep stacking wins." His words became my new mantra. Within a year, I had a small portfolio, repeat clients, and a quiet confidence that no one could take from me. I still thought about my parents, but less with anger and more with clarity. They'd stolen my future, yes, but unknowingly, they'd also forced me to build a new one, brick by brick, with nothing but grit. I wasn't rich. I wasn't successful yet, but I could feel it coming. Something big was on the horizon, and just when my life was finally starting to take shape. The past came crashing back in, dragging my parents' voices with it. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. The number looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. When I picked up, all I heard was quiet sobbing before a shaky voice said, "It's me." "Your sister." I hadn't spoken to her in nearly 2 years. She was always the mediator in the family, the one who tried to keep peace no matter what. Hearing her cry instantly made my stomach knot. "Dad lost his job," she said between breaths. "They're behind on the mortgage. Mom's been pawning jewelry just to pay bills." I didn't say anything for a while. My brain felt split in two. Half of me wanted to hang up. The other half couldn't ignore the pain in her voice. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. "Because they need help," she whispered. They want you to come home," I laughed, but it came out hollow. "They want me to come home? You mean the same people who stole my college fund, kicked me out, and told me to grow up? Those people?" Her silence said everything. "Please," she said finally. "They're not the same anymore. They're scared." Against my better judgment, I drove back to my hometown that weekend. The house that once looked proud and manicured now looked like it was falling apart. Paint peeling, lawn dead, windows dusty. When my dad opened the door, he looked smaller, older, and completely defeated. My mom's eyes were swollen, her voice tired. "We shouldn't have done what we did," she murmured, not quite meeting my gaze. "But you're doing well now. Maybe you could help us get back on our feet." It wasn't an apology. It was a transaction, a plea wrapped in guilt. I stood there in the doorway. the smell of stale air filling my lungs, memories of that night years ago flooding back. For a brief moment I almost pitied them, but then my father said, "You owe us that much after everything we've done for you." And just like that, the pity evaporated. I realized something painfully clear. They hadn't changed. They were still the same people, only now they were desperate. After that visit, I didn't go back. I remember driving away from that dying house, their pleading voices fading in the rearview mirror. My chest felt heavy, but not from guilt, from clarity. That night, I sat in my apartment, opened my laptop, and stared at the glow of the screen like it was salvation. I made myself a promise. I will build something so strong, no one will ever have the power to take it from me again. From that moment, I turned my freelancing hustle into an obsession. I studied business management online, devoured books about entrepreneurship, and reached out to every client I'd ever worked with, offering to expand my services. One client, a marketing firm from California, liked my work so much they offered a long-term contract. That became my stepping stone. With that steady income, I registered my own small digital agency. I hired remote developers, designers, and copywriters from different countries. We called ourselves Nova Code Studio. It started in my one-bedroom apartment. My dining table was my desk, my couch was the meeting area. The early months were chaos, missed deadlines, time zone confusion, endless caffeine. But every small success reminded me I was building something real. By year 2, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. We had clients in 3 countries and were earning more in a month than I used to make in a year. I upgraded to a new apartment, the kind with sunlight pouring through big windows and a city view that felt like a symbol of everything I'd fought for. And yet, even with all that success, there were nights I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, scrolling through old photos, my dad smiling at my high school graduation, my mom hugging me after an award ceremony. For a split second, I'd remember what love used to feel like before it was weaponized. But then I'd close my phone, breathe deep and whisper to myself, "They took your fund, but they'll never take your fire." What I didn't realize, though, was that word of my success had already started spreading through the family, and my parents were about to come knocking again, this time with rehearsed smiles and open hands. It started subtly, just a text from my mom after nearly 3 years of silence. "Hey, sweetheart, heard you're doing amazing. So proud of you. We always knew you'd make it." The sudden warmth was disorienting. I stared at the message for a long time, my gut already twisting. I didn't reply. 2 days later, she called. When I didn't pick up, she tried again. And again, eventually, I answered, curiosity getting the better of me. Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind she used when she wanted something. "Oh, honey, it's been forever. Your father and I were just talking about how talented you've become. We're so proud." "Cut to the chase, Mom," I said flatly. "What do you need?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "We're in a bit of a tough spot. Just some bills piling up. Nothing major. We thought maybe you could lend a little, just to help us get through this month." I almost laughed. "You mean like the money you borrowed for my education?" "Don't be cruel," she snapped. "We're your parents." That word, parents, hit me like a bruise pressed too hard. It wasn't love anymore. It was leverage. Over the next few weeks, the calls became relentless. My dad even emailed me, attaching a long message full of guilt and manipulation. We did what we thought was right back then. "Family means forgiveness, son." They weren't reaching out because they cared. They were reaching out because I had something they wanted again, and this time, they were willing to rewrite history to get it. When I didn't give in, the tone shifted. The sweetness turned bitter. "You wouldn't be where you are without us," my dad said in a voicemail. "We raised you, taught you discipline, made you who you are. You owe us." That word echoed in my mind for days, as if the betrayal, the nights I starved, the years I clawed my way up from nothing meant nothing. Finally, I decided to meet them. Not because I wanted to help, but because I needed to end this cycle once and for all. As I drove back to my hometown, I wasn't the broken kid they'd kicked out. I was the man they never believed I could become, and I was done letting them write my story. I met them at a quiet cafe halfway between my city and theirs. It was a small place with warm lighting and soft jazz playing through old speakers. Peaceful, but I felt anything but. I arrived first, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. My reflection looked calm, but my heart hammered like a drum. When they walked in, I barely recognized them. My dad looked older, worn down by years of stress and pride. My mom tried to hide the cracks with makeup and a forced smile. "There's our boy," she said cheerfully, as if we were meeting for brunch after church instead of a reckoning. I didn't smile back. "Let's get to it." My dad cleared his throat, his voice heavy. "We just need a little help, son. Things got tough. You've done so well. Surely you can help your own family." I leaned forward, eyes steady. "Family doesn't steal their kid's future and call it help." My mom's smile faltered. "We already said we're sorry." "No," I interrupted. "You said you did what you had to do." "That's not an apology. That's justification." She crossed her arms defensively. "You wouldn't even have that career if we hadn't taught you hard lessons about life." I almost laughed. "You're right. You did teach me something. How to survive betrayal." The silence that followed was suffocating. My dad's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." "You're still our son." I took a breath, feeling years of pain rise like a tide. "No, I was your investment, and when it didn't pay off fast enough, you cashed out." They stared at me, stunned. I slid a small envelope across the table. It wasn't money, but a photo of my company's new office. "I built this without your help. Without your lies. Without your name." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "So that's it? You're cutting us off?" I stood up, my voice steady. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm freeing myself." As I walked out, I didn't look back. The bell over the cafe door chimed softly behind me, like a final punctuation mark on a story I'd spent years trying to end. But even as I drove away, a strange emptiness lingered, because for the first time, I realized closure doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it just feels necessary. That night after the confrontation, I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through the city, letting the neon lights blur against my windshield as my thoughts spiraled. I should have felt triumphant. After all, I'd finally stood up to the people who'd stolen my future. But all I felt was hollow. It was like cutting off a part of myself, even if that part had been poisoning me for years. I parked near the river and sat there for hours. The sound of the water hitting the rocks, mixing with the dull hum of traffic in the distance. My hands trembled as I replayed every word, every look on their faces. The anger was gone. In its place was something deeper, grief. Not for them, but for the version of me that used to believe love and loyalty were the same thing. For the first time, I let myself cry. Not quiet, restrained tears, but full, uncontrollable sobs that shook through me like waves. I cried for the kid who worked himself to exhaustion to earn a future that never existed. I cried for the young man who slept on a couch trying to find purpose in pain. And I cried for the realization that no amount of success could fill the void left by broken trust. When the tears finally stopped, I felt lighter, but also empty. I went home, opened my laptop, and searched therapy near me. It was something I'd resisted for years, but now it felt necessary. I needed to untangle the years of resentment, guilt, and self-blame I'd been carrying. In therapy, I started to understand that my parents' betrayal wasn't my fault. I'd been raised to think love was conditional, that I had to earn it, but that was their illusion, not mine. My therapist told me something that stuck. You don't have to forgive them to heal. You just have to let go of their control over your story. That night, I deleted their numbers from my phone. No anger, no hate, just finality. For the first time in my life, silence didn't hurt. It felt like peace, and that peace gave me the clarity to focus not on what they took, but on what I'd built despite them. 3 years passed after that night by the river, and everything in my life looked different. My company had grown beyond anything I ever imagined. We'd opened offices in 2 new countries, hired dozens of employees, and partnered with major clients. I had a team that felt more like family than the one I was born into, people who believed in me, not because they had to, but because I earned their respect. I bought my first house, a quiet place with big windows, white walls and a workspace overlooking the city skyline. On the day I moved in, I stood in the empty living room, sunlight spilling across the floor, and whispered, "You did it." It wasn't about money or success. It was about redemption. Every late night, every tear, every betrayal had led me here. One morning, as I was reviewing contracts, an email popped up from a distant relative, a cousin I barely spoke to. "Hey, your parents were at Uncle Roger's last week. They couldn't stop talking about how proud they are of you. Said you built a company all by yourself. They tell everyone they always knew you'd make it." I just sat there, reading it over and over. I didn't feel anger anymore, just quiet irony. The same people who stole my chance at a future were now taking pride in the future I built without them. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Their validation no longer meant anything. A few months later, I launched a scholarship fund in my company's name for students who'd been denied opportunities due to financial deceit or neglect. I called it the Second Chance Program. Every year, it sends dozens of kids to college, the kind of dream I once had stolen from me. Sometimes, I get thank you letters from those students. They talk about how the scholarship saved them, and every time I read one, I think about how strange life can be, how pain, when faced instead of buried, can turn into purpose. My parents lied to keep me from rising, but their lies did something they never intended. They made me unstoppable. And in the end, that's the greatest revenge there is, becoming everything they said I couldn't be, and needing nothing from them ever again.